During the COVID-19 crisis, after long and tough negotiations, EU leaders took the unprecedented step of designing a 750 billion euro package funded by common borrowing. The goal of this was to help the economy overcome the pandemic shock. At the heart of this package lies the Recovery and Resilience Facility, or the RRF for short. The RRF has been widely hailed as a breakthrough for European integration, not only because of its impressive financial size, but also because it introduces several important governance innovations. First, it requires member states to present plans linking reforms to investments in order to achieve synergies between the two. Second, it's a demand-driven instrument, which means that member states themselves design the plans in line with European requirements in order to boost national ownership and legitimacy. Third, it relies on the principle of performance-based financing, where funds are dispersed only once concrete milestones and targets are fulfilled in order to ensure that the plans get implemented. In other words, payment follows results, not simply receipts. The RRF governance model sets a new standard for European funding instruments, and it's already been copied in other policy fields. Hence, evaluating the RRF's legitimacy and effectiveness to see if it meets these high expectations is of crucial importance for both scholars and policymakers.
So what do we do in this study? Together with our colleague Edgars Eihmanis from Tartu University, we analyzed the drafting, implementation, and monitoring of national reform and investment plans in 8 member states and in 3 shadow cases. Together, these countries cover the majority of spending under the RRF. We assessed all relevant documents and literature, and we conducted 74 interviews with the policymakers most closely involved with the plans. Importantly, we also assessed the renegotiation and updating of the plans following the inflationary shock triggered by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as such, this study significantly surpasses the state-of-the-art in the literature. Our paper carefully assesses each step of the RRF procedure, using examples from the case studies. We also included an extensive annex with a country-by-country comparison. We conclude our paper with a series of strengths and weaknesses of the RRF's governance design, to which I will turn next. In terms of strengths, we find that the RRF reinforces national ownership and commitment to reform and investment objectives, especially within the central government. The link between reforms and investments is particularly widely appreciated by member states' officials. One may think here of investments in childcare centers linked to reforms that guarantee a place for every 2-year-old. Also, the fact that there is a single plan with clear deliverables and timelines helps to streamline the administration around a set of priorities. It makes the government's deliverables more transparent, which increases public pressure to deliver on time in order to obtain the funds from the EU. In our study, we described several clear examples where the pressure of the RRF deadlines helped overcome domestic veto players and thus push big reforms over the finish line.
At the same time, our empirical analysis also demonstrates a number of structural weaknesses, many of which could have been predicted from international experience with performance-based financing models elsewhere. First, the mechanical linkage between the milestones and targets in national plans and disbursement of EU funds shifts policymakers' attention away from the underlying purposes of reforms and investments towards documentary verification to prove that milestones and targets have been fulfilled. The result of this practice is widespread frustration among national officials about excessive bureaucracy. We also find that the European Court of Auditors and critical member states in the Council have exacerbated this bureaucracy by consistently demanding tighter procedures for audit and control. Second, the national plans were designed for a period of 6 years after long negotiations with the Commission. But once agreed, they're difficult to change. This means that it's hard to revise the plans to take account of changing circumstances or lessons learned during project implementation. In the past 2 years, the Commission has introduced a number of ad hoc flexibility procedures or workarounds which help alleviate the problem, but the revision process remains very cumbersome. Third, while the RRF strengthens ownership of national governments, it also leads to a centralization of decision-making, as local and regional authorities have mostly been sidelined. We close our study with some suggestions for improvement if similar instruments are to be used by the EU in the future. The key principle for redesigning the RRF governance model would be to move away from the idea of national plans as putatively complete contracts, where reforms and investments are operationalized ex ante in minute detail. Instead, member states should be given greater flexibility on the means for achieving agreed commitments, as well as for revising them in response to changing circumstances and lessons learned through dynamic, forward-looking monitoring of implementation. In this way, the governance model would retain the strengths of promoting reform, ownership, and commitment without becoming overly rigid and bureaucratic. Since both national ownership and performance-based financing are widely discussed mantras in the international policy literature, our findings should be of broad interest not only to EU specialists, but also to comparative scholars concerned with governance innovations aimed at increasing the performance orientation of public funding and enhancing domestic support for structural reforms. Thanks for your attention. You can find the paper in open access on the Regulation and Governance website. We hope you enjoy reading it, and we look forward to any comments you might have.